Hi, my name is Abria, and this is my channel. I'm going to be talking about my art process. I'm a watercolor artist, and this is just going to be from beginning to end, from inspiration to how I prep my paper, what colors I choose, to some of the little techniques and tips that I have for creating certain things, and the things that I do along the way that I make mistakes on. So that's what this video is going to be about. I hope to make this a series in the future, where every art piece that I try, every idea that I want to try, I just kind of go through from beginning to end. So I will be putting chapters and everything. The chapters will obviously show like what part of the process I'm in, and if you're interested in certain things, obviously skip. But I'm going to get into things like color mixing. I do use a limited palette, so I use yellow, blue, and red, and obviously like warm, cool versions of those in order to mix the colors. So if that's something that's interesting to you, please listen and watch and follow for more. And yeah, here goes the rest of the video. All right, so I do have my notes here on my computer, so I will be moving back and forth just to kind of keep track of everything in the order in which I do it. So my inspiration always starts with Pinterest. I know it's like a tried and true thing. I usually start with a piece of art that I'll just like randomly be scrolling and then see something that catches my eye, whether it's the composition of the art piece or the photo that I'm looking at or the drawing that I'm looking at, painting. It's usually the composition, it could be the color, or it could just be the overall vibe of what the picture is portraying. Like, I really like themes, or I'm drawn to themes of romanticism, landscapes, and soft fabrics and textiles. So those things tend to fall on my For You page, or I don't know what it's called on Pinterest now, but the little page that shows you the things that you're interested in. I usually get similar type things, and I do organize all my favorite things that just catch my eye. I've put those in, their own boards and things, and then I'll use the references in the future for like a different project, or I kind of just like pick and choose what I want. And then from there, I kind of can create a composition based off of the elements of multiple different pins that I have. One piece that actually caught my eye was this pin right here. I just like how the body is laying, and I like the folds of the fabric. So that was where I started, was this figure laying in the middle with the background in the back. The background of this one is kind of boring, so that's the reason why I'd pull a different reference of like grass and flowers and just the trees in the background, clouds, from other references, and just kind of plop them down. So when I paint, I draw the underdrawing first, and then from the underdrawing, I will soak the paper. And then in this case, I did a wash, which that's where actually I went wrong. Just a side note, like I used a mop brush, and let me actually grab it. Let me see if I can grab it real quick. Okay. Hope I can get this to zoom in, or I use a mop brush similar to this right here. So if you can tell, this mop brush is very small. It's a size 4, and it was my first time using it. Not the best choice to do an overall wash, and if you can tell, my sheet of paper was very large, and for some reason I thought I could just get away with using this one mop brush in order to cover the entirety of the canvas, and it just did not work in the way that I was imagining it. So I did get a new brush for that. I got like a I haven't gotten it yet. I don't know, I can't remember the exact name of it, but I actually think it's called a wash brush. It's like a square brush with a short handle. So that's coming in soon for the next picture, but that's where I went wrong with this one. I kind of just applied the base wash so sloppily, and I wasn't fast enough because I was trying to get down like the recording process, and I ended up having like these weird streaks of darker red and then like lighter red. It was horrible, and I had to kind of stick with it because unfortunately with watercolor, you just don't want to work the paper too much because there's only so much tooth that the paper has, and the more you kind of put pressure on and remove and, take away, add more water, you just win the integrity of the paper. So I had to stick with it. I dealt with it. It is what it is. It does show up a little bit in the painting, especially with, parts of the grass or parts of the sky where the color application is a little bit more translucent. I don't put that much value on top of that. It ends up, I can see it through. It might not be that big of a deal for somebody who's looking at it, but that's where I went wrong. I won't be doing that again. So that's lesson number one. I'll definitely be taking that as a learning experience for the next one. When it comes to color mixing or like just mixing up the basic shapes or the base colors of the entirety of the picture, I work with a really wet brush and again, mixing the basic base colors of things. So applying it in grand swipes, um, not really focusing on detail, actually not focusing on detail at all other than the color of what I want each thing to be. And the reason why is because it's better for me to work in layers. In watercolor, you would work from light to dark, or from what I kind of describe it or feel it as is like light to heavy. So the application of your brush is like, or it's almost like wet to dry. I know that's not the terminology for it, but you want to work with a brush that is super wet from the beginning. And then once you get closer and or as you get further into the process, when you apply more details, you want your details to be put on with a brush or a brush that is more dry. So you can really hone in on those details and be like crisp and accurate with them. And then, of course, at that point, you're hopefully not making as many mistakes because you're just kind of fine tuning the like the finer details of things with smaller brushes that don't hold as much water to begin with. So yeah, the color mixing, I start with mixing yellow and blue to make the green for the grass. But it does matter the kind of yellow that I use for the grass or for the majority of the grass. I am using a shade of yellow that is on the cool side along with I use the same shade of blue throughout. I don't change the shade of blue because blue for me, I don't tend to have to adjust it too often. Either way, I use blue, like the same shade of blue, and then a cool yellow in order to achieve a brighter green. If I were to use a warm green, it looks really brown, and that's really not what I'm going for. At least not for the majority of, you know, the grass of a area. Like to have a muddier color as my base wouldn't really serve me a purpose. And I say muddy, I'm thinking of like actual mud. I don't want it to be brown because closer to brown is like closer to darkness in the way that I can see it. I don't know if I'm saying anything that is making sense, but when you start with a color that is darker, you have a harder time with like applying details on top because the details have to be darker in order for you to kind of see them. And you don't ever want to start at a deficit in that way because you can't really build on it. So again, with watercolor, you are building from this thinness, lightness to depth and detail. And I hope that that makes sense, but you can kind of see it in the process as I'll continue on. um, I'll start picking darker colors, or when I say darker colors, I'm choosing more opaque colors to apply on the detail side. You can't really do that. They don't really show up that well if your color is dark to begin with. That's all I'm trying to say. uh, Visually, like when you look at something, there's a relationship with color temperature and like distance. So the things that like it's not as simple as just putting white because white doesn't always translate as brightness. Sometimes it can translate as like coldness because white isn't really ever like, at least to me, when I look at the white that I have like a gouache that's it looks like it's on the cooler side. So when it's applied on top of watercolor, it gives things a duller appearance, which is necessary in some cases, but it's not always going to be helpful when I want to portray brightness or even just like closeness to my point of view. I hope this makes sense. I think if you look into color temperature, color theory, and kind of the relationship between that, and how close or far something is, or how bright or how dark something is based off of the color that you use. So, things that are closer to the light, things that reflect off the light more or bounce light off of it more, are going to be yellow, red, orange. Things that are darker in the shadows are going to be on the blues, the purples, and the greens. And that's just, it makes sense when you're painting. So now I'm going to move in to the clouds. So I started with a wet brush for the clouds. This actually was my first time painting clouds in watercolor. So I would just do a general outline of the clouds in a not quite opaque, but it does have a lot of pigment on the brush. And then I dip my brush in water, dry it off a smidge, and then I'm pushing the edge of the water down away from the outline. And I'm not actually touching the outline part. I'm getting up to the outline until you get like a little thin outline of the top, and then everything else is going to be pushed down, and it's going to not dissolve. What is the word? Um, I want it to have a gradient, and I want it to kind of get from as a dark purple in the outline or dark blue on the outline to the lightest possible blue that I can get with that particular motion. Again, I'm kind of over explaining what I'm actually doing, but it makes sense when you do it in practice. I use a round brush for this. It tends to be a little bit easier. They hold a lot of water, so when you dry it off, you can kind of absorb some of the water that you put around the edge into the brush, and then by holding it sideways, you push some of that color down. Um, again, this makes sense in practice, and if you just look at it, it might make more sense. I might be over explaining it again, but that's how I make the clouds, and I actually like really enjoyed making the clouds this way. Moving into the skin, in this case, I am using all three colors. I'm just using them in different amounts. Primarily, I'm using red, yellow, and then a little bit of blue to create that depth. If it's, a color that's, or if it's like a shadowed version of brown, then I'll add more blue to it. But I am using a warm red, and I'm using a warm yellow to mix this kind of what color would I call it? Not quite terracotta, but like is it terracotta? Would I call it terracotta? I don't know, burnt sienna. Like that's the crayon color that I can think of. It's closer to that color, and I ended up having to like take a little journal on the side and just swatch it because the first color that I had was a little too gray. And again, when you're doing watercolor, you want to start with what is perceived as the brightest color first, because if you put down something dark, it is kind of hard to overtake that dark with lightness. It's a little bit easier to have a bright color and then like add darkness to it. It ends up looking really muddy if you go in the inverse. So not I don't really want the more blue green version of a color to go first unless it's something that's like grass or something that I'm intentionally making darker because that's just the shade of the grass. As you work through the process, you kind of figure out how to best go in an order that can achieve the color that you want. And actually I think that's actually it when it comes to the skin and the fabric. I mean, there's not much to say about the fabric. The fabric is pink, so that's just a thin red and applying it in layers. I do add a little bit of blue because I could add black, but black wouldn't necessarily read as darkness. Black, if I were to use black, it would just look muddier than you want it to look. And again, in watercolor, the medium is very thin, fluid. It just doesn't work the same way. Maybe it works that way in oils. I honestly don't know. I don't have that much experience with oils, but with watercolor, it's probably possible to work with black. I don't use black a lot. I really only use that for details. It's only for when I need to specifically outline something really small in black. just to make it pop up against something else. But other than that, I'm not really using black or white because it's harder to not control. I don't know what the word is. It's like it makes it harder to like figure out what color you're trying to actually get to. It's easier to me to just work with yellow, red, and blue and like the different temperatures of those colors, and then if necessary add white, add black. So I hope that makes sense. It's not, I don't know, it's just easier. I don't know why it's easier, but I think I get more expected results. I think that's what I mean by easier. I get what I'm expecting when I mix your hues. If I add white and black, this it doesn't work. And maybe it's because black and white aren't colors. Maybe because they're just values of light. You can't, they're not easily replicated, I guess, because the whites that you see in palettes and like tempera and gouache and stuff, they're shades of something. So I don't know. And then just some random like tidbits. My last little section here, last like random things I would do differently, and what to look forward to in the future. What I would do differently, I would figure out how to record my videos in a more consistent fashion. I have a hard time with like the color balancing, white balance of the editing of the videos. So that's like a technical thing. But I didn't always like have the same settings on all the cameras that I have. So that's just, it makes it harder to keep the colors consistent when I'm trying to show people like this is the color that I mixed. It's like I would rather that be a little bit more consistent. Um, and to look forward in the future, I have ideas of the next painting, and if I have them here I will show them, but I don't know if I'll have them by the time I'm actually editing this video, so we'll see. Oh, also, we're not using this to create red or put red on the entire canvas. We're not doing that again. So that is the main thing that I'm not gonna do this time around. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I hope this made somewhat of sense. If it doesn't, obviously, like add your questions and comments, or add the questions and your comments in the comment section. I'll try to do my best to answer these, but like I said, I'm not like a teacher or anything like that. I just kind of go with the flow and learn by doing. So if you have any advice or have any answers to the many questions I've asked just now, like recording, like please, by all means, inform me. I would like to learn. So until next time, that was it. Bye.